Today, an alien fleet comes for our world. Humans do not run, a calm team waits a secret, and an empire starts to fear.
The alien armada arrived 12 minutes before sunrise over the Pacific, and every defense satellite Earth owned went dark at the same time. Not destroyed, not jammed, not even touched. They simply stopped broadcasting, as if the entire planet had closed its eyes by choice. High Marshal Threx watched the blue world rotate beneath his flagship and waited for the first screams to reach the open channels. He had conquered 9 inhabited systems in his lifetime, and every civilization reacted the same way when the shadow of his fleet crossed their sky. First came panic, then denial, then the desperate flood of prayers, threats, surrender terms, and broken diplomatic codes from leaders trying to sound calm while their people emptied cities behind them. Earth gave him none of that. For 63 seconds, the planet remained silent. Then one message appeared on every Imperial command screen, written in perfect High Dominion script, using a military encryption standard that had never been shared beyond the Empire's inner war council. You are late. Threx did not move. Around him, bridge officers froze in their stations, their claws hovering above glass controls, their eyes reflecting the impossible sentence. The translation corps confirmed it 3 times. The message was not a corrupted signal. It was not a prank from a captured relay. It came from Earth, from somewhere beneath its oceans, and it carried an authentication signature stolen from a Dominion conquest archive that had been sealed for 140 years. The humans were not supposed to know that language existed. They were not supposed to know the Dominion existed until the first surrender demand was delivered. They were not supposed to answer before being spoken to. A junior officer near the tactical pit whispered that Earth's orbital debris field was changing position. Threx turned slowly toward the main display. Thousands of dead satellites, broken probes, abandoned rocket shells, and forgotten communication platforms were moving. Not quickly, not aggressively. They shifted with the quiet precision of pieces on a board, forming rings inside rings around the planet, like an old machine remembering its purpose after pretending to be scrapped for generations. The weapons officer scanned them and reported no active cannons, no reactors, no missile cores, no military signatures. Only dead metal. That should have comforted Threx. Instead, something cold moved through the command deck. Because dead things did not arrange themselves into perfect defensive geometry. Below, on Earth, in a command chamber buried beneath 11 kilometers of black ocean, Commander Maravas stood before a wall of silent monitors while the world above her slept through the first minute of the war. Her face was calm, but her hands were locked behind her back so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Beside her, Dr. Elias Wren stared at the same message now glowing on the confirmation screen. They received it, he said. Mara did not look away from the orbital map, where the alien fleet hung like a crown of knives above the planet. Good, she said. Now let them wonder how long we have been waiting. Then one of the dead satellites opened. The satellite did not unfold like a weapon. It opened like an eye. A seam appeared across its burned aluminum hull, so thin that Imperial sensors first classified it as thermal cracking. Then the old machine turned toward the fleet, and from inside its hollow frame came a single pulse of blue-white light that carried no heat, no radiation spike, and no detectable warhead signature. It crossed the silence between Earth and the Armada in less than a second, touched the shields of High Marshal Threx's flagship, and vanished without impact. Nothing exploded. No alarms sounded. For one dangerous moment, the Dominion bridge relaxed. Then every historical conquest file in Threx's private command archive unlocked itself. The main display is filled with names that should never have appeared outside the Empire's sealed memory vaults. Very Colony, Haldron Nest, the Silent Garden, Eureka Prime, civilizations the Dominion had broken, absorbed, renamed, and buried beneath polite military language. Each one appeared with dates, casualty projections, surrender protocols, and the exact phrases Imperial officers had used when they told themselves conquest was stabilization. Threx rose from his command throne. On every ship in the first assault formation, officers were seeing the same thing. Not tactical data, not enemy propaganda. Their own records, their own victories, their own hidden shame, dragged out of locked archives by a human satellite that had been listed for 81 years as a dead weather monitor. "Cut the feed," Threx said. The communications officer obeyed instantly. The files remained. Inside the ocean floor chamber, Maravas watched the Dominion fleet's internal traffic spike from a clean military rhythm into a storm of overlapping panic commands. She did not smile. No one in the chamber did. The first pulse had not been designed to kill. It had been designed to ask a question. No empire survived easily once its soldiers heard it clearly. "What exactly have you been serving?" Dr. Elias Wren stood beside the central console, his thin face washed in monitor light. He had spent 30 years building systems that almost no living politician had been allowed to fully understand. To the public, the orbital graveyard was a mess of old human ambition, forgotten budgets, failed launches, and rusting machines circling the planet like memories nobody wanted to pay to clean up. To Elias, every dead satellite was a sealed witness. Every broken probe was a listening post. Every useless shell was part of the same patient lie. The Dominion had studied Earth's armies, navies, air forces, weapons treaties, public space programs, and political divisions. They had watched debates, elections, riots, markets, disasters, and wars. They had measured humanity's noise and mistaken it for weakness. They had never understood humanity's silence. The chamber's youngest analyst, Sana Iqbal, leaned forward as one line of alien telemetry turned red. "Marshal Threx is trying to isolate his command network." "Let him," Mara said. "He may stop the broadcast." "No," Elias replied quietly. "He may stop his ships from receiving the next part. He cannot stop the first part from being remembered." Sanaa looked at him, and for the first time that morning, fear broke through her training. "Sir, what exactly did we send them?" Elias hesitated. That hesitation moved through the chamber faster than any alarm could have. Dozens of officers kept their eyes on their stations, but the room felt suddenly smaller, as if everyone had realized that the first strike of the war had not been approved by a weapons council. It had been approved by historians. Mara answered before Elias could. "The truth," she said. Above Earth, the old machines continued to move. Across Africa, Asia, Europe, the Americas, and the islands scattered through dark oceans, people woke to emergency messages that did not tell them to run. They told them to stay near communication devices, protect local infrastructure, avoid rumor channels, and wait for official instructions. No government claimed the situation was under control. That would have been too fragile a lie. Instead, every message used the same simple phrase, translated into thousands of human languages. "Stand steady." In apartments, hospitals, farms, factories, refugee camps, submarines, orbital habitats, and research stations, people read those two words and felt the strange terror of not being treated like children. The sky was full of invaders. The planet was under threat. Something enormous and hidden had clearly begun. Yet the voice speaking to humanity did not beg for calm. Trusted them with fear. That trust became its own kind of weapon. Threx did not understand that part. He watched civilian channels expecting collapse and saw instead the first impossible pattern of the morning. Cities were frightened, but they were not breaking. Traffic slowed but did not stampede. Hospitals shifted into protected mode. Power grids separated into hardened local cells. Civil defense networks that Imperial intelligence had dismissed as ceremonial suddenly became active with disciplined efficiency. The humans were afraid, yes, but their fear had channels prepared for it. That unsettled him more than courage would have. Courage was simple. Courage charged. Courage shouted. Courage died loudly and gave an empire something clean to crush. This was different. This was billions of frightened creatures moving as if someone had taught them long ago that terror could be survived if it had somewhere useful to go. "Where are their weapons?" Threx demanded. The tactical officer scanned the orbital field again. Still no major military signatures. "Then why are they letting us see this?" No one answered. That was when the second satellite opened. Then a third. Then 50. Across Earth's orbit, the graveyard began waking in layers, not as cannons, but as transmitters. They pointed away from the Dominion fleet, away from Earth, away from the battle entirely. Their dishes aligned toward deep space, toward trade routes, conquered systems, neutral relay chains, and regions the Dominion considered politically quiet. Threx saw the vector map and understood too late that the humans had not aimed their first move at him. They had aimed it at everyone behind him.
Now see it. A war plan made from calm, old metal and memory.
In the ocean chamber, Sanaa's screen filled with confirmation lights from ancient probes, lunar mirrors, undersea cables, abandoned Mars relays, and civilian telescopes that had quietly accepted military code older than she was. One by one, they joined the same impossible network. Mara finally allowed herself one breath. "Lantern Grid is awake," Sanaa said, her voice thin with awe. Elias closed his eyes for half a second, not in relief, but in grief for the years it had taken to build a weapon made of memory. Then the Dominion fleet changed formation. Not retreat, not attack, a containment pattern. Mara saw the shift and felt the first true edge of danger slide beneath her ribs. Threx had realized enough. Not all of it, but enough to know Earth was not trying to win a battle in orbit. Earth was trying to turn his empire into a courtroom before the first shot was fired. Sanaa looked up from her console. "Commander, he is targeting the transmitters." Mara's jaw tightened. "How long until the first relay dies?" 40 seconds. On the main display, hundreds of Imperial targeting lines reached toward the awakened satellites, and beneath the ocean, every human in the chamber understood the terrible truth at the same time. Earth had revealed the lantern too early, or the enemy had learned too fast. The first relay died above the Indian Ocean. It had once been a civilian weather satellite with a cracked solar wing, retired from public service before most of the officers in Mara's chamber had been born. For 37 years, it had drifted through orbit as a piece of forgotten machinery, appearing in school diagrams, debris forecasts, and old engineering jokes about humanity's inability to clean up after itself. Then, for 48 seconds, it became one of the most important objects in human history. An Imperial lance struck it through the core, and the satellite vanished in a white flash so brief that no one on the ground saw it with the naked eye. In the ocean chamber, its confirmation light went black. No one spoke. Then another relay died over the Arctic. Then 3 more above the Atlantic. Mara watched the lantern grid shrink one light at a time, and every loss felt like a finger being cut from a hand that had spent decades reaching into the dark. The Dominion fleet had not opened fire on cities. Not yet. Threx was too disciplined for panic, too intelligent to waste force on emotion. He understood the priority now. Stop the message. Blind the witnesses. Kill the truth before it traveled farther than Earth's sky. That made him more dangerous than any conqueror who simply wanted blood. "Relay chain degradation at 9%, Sanaa said, her voice controlled only because she was forcing each word into shape. 12%. 16. Elias Wren did not look at the dying lights. He looked at the deeper map behind them, the one almost no one in the chamber had clearance to read. It showed more than orbit. It showed the moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, the outer survey stations, the abandoned probes that had left Earth generations ago, and thousands of faint lines stretching outward like veins from a heart nobody had known was still beating. "Do not switch to the reserve grid," he said. Mara turned toward him. "They are burning through the primary chain." "I know. If the lantern dies inside local space, the broadcast never reaches the occupied systems." "I know that too." His calm struck the room like a second crisis. Officers looked up despite themselves. Sanaa's hands paused above her console. Even the emergency lights seemed to hum more loudly beneath the pressure of what he had just said. Mara lowered her voice. "Elias, if there is something you have not told me, this would be the moment." For the first time since the war began, the old scientist looked afraid. Not of the Dominion, not of death. Afraid of the thing he had built being understood too late. "The orbital grid was never the lantern," he said. "It was the match." Before Mara could answer, the floor beneath them trembled. It was not an impact. The chamber was too deep, too protected, too isolated beneath layers of ocean and black volcanic rock for orbital fire to reach it easily. The vibration came from inside Earth itself, from machinery working below the command vault, deeper than the elevators went, deeper than the official diagrams admitted. Sanaa stared at her instruments. "Commander, I am detecting power movement through the transoceanic cable network." Mara's eyes narrowed. "Civilian cables? All of them. Across the planet, undersea fiber lines that carried stock trades, family calls, medical data, military orders, wedding videos, weather reports, and the endless ordinary noise of human civilization began to pulse in patterns no civilian system had requested. The signals were small, hidden inside legal traffic, wrapped in the harmless rhythms of daily life. To the Dominion sensors, Earth still looked noisy, chaotic, inefficient, primitive. That had always been the disguise. In Lagos, a telecommunications engineer watching emergency diagnostics saw impossible bandwidth open through a cable segment that had been damaged for 6 years. In Tokyo, a university telescope rotated without human command and locked onto a patch of empty sky. In rural Argentina, an old radio observatory that had become a museum lit up for the first time since its funding was cut. In Alaska, a school science array buried beneath snow began transmitting encrypted packets through auroral static. None of them knew the whole plan. That was why the plan had survived. Threx watched Earth's surface brighten in his tactical overlay, not with weapons fire, but with communications. Millions of harmless signals rose from the planet at once, bouncing through weather systems, civilian towers, ocean cables, research stations, aircraft, ships, and private satellites. His officers tried to isolate the command source and found too many. They tried to jam the strongest signals and watched weaker ones grow stronger in response. They tried to classify the traffic and discovered that most of it appeared to be ordinary human life. A child's video call carried 3 fragments of a Dominion massacre record. A shipping update carried coordinates from a conquered moon. A hospital database request carried the voiceprint of an imperial governor ordering the erasure of a species name. The humans had hidden an indictment inside their civilization.
I love how normal life is now a message no king can stop.
Threx understood the horror of it then. Not horror at destruction. He understood destruction. Destruction was clean compared to this. This was a contamination of certainty. This was a species turning its own daily existence into a delivery system for memory, making every attempt to silence it look like an attack on civilians. Every jammed signal a confession. Every destroyed relay proof that the Empire feared what the message contained. "Shut down their surface communications," he ordered. The bridge went silent. His tactical officer looked back slowly. "High Marshal, that would require wide area strikes. I am aware. Against civilian infrastructure." Threx's mandibles tightened. "I am aware." That hesitation lasted only 2 seconds, but inside those 2 seconds, something entered the Dominion fleet that no human weapon could have fired. Doubt. Tiny, poisonous, impossible to recall once released. Every officer on that bridge had just seen the files. Every officer knew what the Empire had done to worlds that looked smaller than Earth. Every officer now understood that if they obeyed the order, their own hands would become part of the next broadcast. Mara saw the delay in the enemy formation. 1 breath. 2. 3. "Why have they stopped firing?" Sanaa asked. "They are deciding what kind of monsters they are willing to be while everyone is watching," Elias said. Mara felt the answer settle over the room. This was the true shape of the Lantern Protocol. Not a shield, not a cannon. A mirror held up at the exact moment an empire raised its fist. Then the Dominion made its choice. The first strike did not target a city. There was too careful for that. It targeted a deep-sea communications hub off the coast of New Zealand, a perfect military compromise on paper, important enough to slow the Lantern but remote enough to justify as infrastructure warfare. The Imperial Lance descended through the atmosphere in a clean line of violet fire. It never reached the ocean. Halfway down, something beneath the waves answered. A ring of blue light opened under the Pacific, vast and circular, too large to be any human machine the Dominion had catalogued. The lance bent, split, and scattered harmlessly across the upper atmosphere in a shimmering veil that turned the night sky over half the planet briefly bright as dawn. In the ocean chamber, every monitor went white. Sanaa whispered, "Commander, that did not come from our defense grid." Elias looked older at that moment than Mara had ever seen him. "No," he said softly. "That came from the part of Earth we never managed to turn off." For 7 seconds, no one in the ocean chamber understood what they had seen. The monitors had gone white, not from failure, but from saturation. Every sensor pointed toward the Pacific had been flooded with reflected energy, magnetic distortion, and a signal structure so old that the translation systems refused to classify it as language. It had not behaved like a weapon. It had behaved like a boundary. The Imperial Lance had entered Earth's atmosphere with enough force to cut through a hardened communications hub, and something beneath the water had simply disagreed with its right to continue. Mara Voss stood motionless before the blank screens, feeling the entire war shift under her feet. Until that moment, humanity had been fighting a dangerous but understandable enemy with dangerous but understandable plans. The Dominion wanted surrender. Earth wanted exposure, survival, and leverage. Every move had been brutal, strategic, and human. But the blue ring under the Pacific had not come from any defense system Mara had been briefed on, and she had been briefed on things that could have ended governments if spoken aloud. "Restore visual," she ordered. Technicians moved fast. The main display flickered, broke into static, then rebuilt itself in layers. First came the orbital map, then the Dominion fleet, then Earth's surface. Finally, the Pacific appeared as a dark curve beneath cloud bands, peaceful except for a widening circle of pale blue light fading beneath the waves like the closing eye of something enormous. Sanaa Iqbal's voice came thin from her station. The Dominion strike dispersed at 46 kilometers altitude. No casualties reported. The communications hub is intact. A breath moved through the chamber, but it was not relief. Relief belonged to danger that had passed. This felt like danger that had introduced itself. Mara turned to Elias Wren. "Explain." He did not answer immediately, and that silence frightened her more than any alarm. Elias had spent his life preparing humanity for impossible things. He knew how to speak about extinction scenarios, hidden weapons, hostile empires, and century-long deception with the calm precision of a man discussing weather models. Now his hands were trembling. "Elias," Mara said, sharper this time. He looked at the Pacific display. "In 2039, during the first deep ocean neutrino survey, we found a structure under the Chromatic Trench. Not a ruin, not a ship, not a machine in any way we understood. It was embedded beneath the crust, older than the seafloor around it, and it responded only once when we scanned it." "What did it say?" "That was the problem," Elias said. "It did not say anything. It listened."
A silent man under sea may be old and far more scary.
The words settled badly in the room. Above Earth, High Marshal Threx was having his own crisis. His bridge crew had replayed the failed strike 6 times, each version slower, cleaner, more impossible. The lance had not been blocked by a shield, because shields left resistance signatures. It had not been intercepted, because nothing had crossed its path. The beam had reached a specific altitude and then lost the authority to remain coherent, as if the laws around it had been edited. Threx stared at the image of the blue ring beneath Earth's ocean and felt, for the first time in decades, the unpleasant sensation of standing in front of a locked door and realizing the room behind it might be larger than his empire. "Classify the phenomenon," he said. The science officer's throat plates fluttered. "Unknown. Origin. Unknown. Human." The officer hesitated. "Unconfirmed." Threx hated that answer because it was careful, and careful answers were where fear hid when discipline still had command of the mouth. The Dominion fleet adjusted again, spreading into a wider containment shell. Their first priority remained the lantern transmissions, but now they had a second priority they did not understand. Earth had become 2 threats at once: the visible human trap and the invisible thing beneath the planet's skin. Threx could crush a military. He could adapt to strategy. He could even survive surprise. But he could not conquer a world whose deepest secret might not belong to the species living on it. And then the situation worsened. A priority signal burst through the Imperial fleet from the Dominion rear command chain. Reinforcement wings were entering high-speed transit. Not dozens of ships. Hundreds. The Empire had seen the broadcast fragments, the broken conquest records, the hesitation inside Threx's formation, and the failed strike over the Pacific. Somewhere far beyond Earth, frightened rulers had reached the only conclusion empires trusted. Send more force before doubt spreads. Sanaa caught the incoming movement through stolen Dominion routing echoes 3 minutes later. Her face changed before she spoke, and Mara knew the number would be bad. Commander, new fleet elements are inbound through 3 outer system vectors. Estimated arrival, 6 hours. How many? Sanaa swallowed. At least 500 additional vessels. The chamber seemed to lose oxygen. Mara looked at the map. Earth's plan had been designed around 1 assault fleet, possibly 2, and a political exposure event that would slow escalation by forcing the Dominion to manage optics across its conquered territories. But the Empire was reacting faster than projected. Not because it was confident, because it was scary. Fear made weak enemies retreat. Fear made powerful enemies overcommit. That meant the lantern was working. It also meant Earth might not live long enough to benefit from it. Elias stepped closer to Mara and lowered his voice. We need the reserve grid now. You told me not to activate it. I told you not to activate it before the deep system woke. Mara's eyes hardened. Do not make me drag every secret out of you while enemy reinforcements are 6 hours away. Elias looked at her then, and whatever fear had been in him became something heavier. Regret. The reserve grid is not a weapon either, he said. It is a question buried across the solar system. Mara waited. When we found the structure beneath the Pacific, we spent years trying to communicate with it. Nothing worked. Then, once, during a Dominion archival transmission we intercepted, it reacted. Not to their language, to their pattern, their conquest sequence, their method of approaching young civilizations. Elias drew a slow breath. We began to suspect it had seen something like them before. Sanaa turned from her console. Something like the Dominion? No, Elias said. Something like us. That answer struck harder than any explosion. Mara looked back at the blue fading under the Pacific. For the first time, she understood the terrible shape of the secret beneath the secret. Humanity had not only prepared for the Dominion. Humanity had found evidence that Earth itself had been marked long before humans climbed out of caves, long before nations, rockets, wars, and satellites. Something ancient had been waiting under the ocean, listening to see what kind of species would rise above it. And now, with the Dominion burning through the sky, it had answered. On the main display, a new alert appeared. Not from orbit, not from the fleet, from every deep ocean station on Earth at once. Sanaa read the signal with a voice that barely held together. Commander, the Pacific structure is transmitting outward. Mara felt the room go still. Where? Sanaa looked up, and the fear in her eyes had become awe. To the other buried sites. The first answer came from Antarctica. It rose through the ice beneath a research station that had been officially abandoned for 12 years. A place the public maps still marked as unsafe because of collapsed tunnels, buried fuel tanks, and weather systems violent enough to peel steel from concrete. At 9:14 Universal Time Coordinated, every sensor on the continent pointed toward the same impossible reading. A line of blue light moved under the ice sheet, not melting it, not cracking it, simply passing through the ancient frozen dark as if the planet had opened one hidden nerve and sent a thought along it. Then came the Andes, then the Sahara, then the Mariana Trench, the Greenland Shelf, the basalt plains beneath Siberia, the bedrock below the Australian desert, and 13 more locations that had never appeared in any defense document Maravos had read. Each site answered the Pacific structure with a pulse too clean to be natural and too old to be human. Across the map, Earth began to glow from beneath its skin, not like a weapon charging, but like a sleeping mind discovering that the room around it was no longer quiet. In the ocean chamber, no one moved for several seconds. Mara had trained for invasion, orbital bombardment, infrastructure collapse, and the kind of command decisions that left names carved into memorial walls. She had not trained for the planet itself joining the conversation. The Dominion had arrived expecting to intimidate a young species. Humanity had responded with hidden preparation. But now something older than humanity had looked at the violence above the atmosphere and decided it was relevant. Elias Wren stood with one hand pressed against the edge of the console, his face pale in the blue reflection. "There were supposed to be 7, he whispered. Mara turned toward him slowly. "You found 7? "We found 7 probable sites. We confirmed 3. The rest were theoretical." He looked at the display as new lights appeared in places no survey had ever marked. "There are 21.
So many hidden sites are awake now, and no one can feel safe.
Sanaa Iqbal Station began screaming with incoming data. Not alarms. Confirmations. Deep ocean cables, civilian telescopes, military satellites, abandoned Mars relays, lunar mirrors, asteroid survey drones, and old Voyager-class memorial probes all began receiving the same layered signal. It did not translate into words. It arranged itself into patterns, then into histories, then into something worse than history. Memory. The first visual formed on the central wall without being requested. A star system none of them recognized, with 3 inhabited moons circling a pale gas giant. Ships arrived above them in formation. Not Dominion ships, but something older, sharper, built around the same principle of certainty. The sequence showed the same steps humanity had seen in Dominion records. Classification, warning, containment, compliance offer, strike, absorption, erasure. Then the image shifted to another system, another species, another young world learning too late that the sky could belong to someone else. Mara understood before Elias said it. The Dominion was not the first empire to do this. "No," Elias said. "They inherited a pattern." The words changed the shape of the war. Until that moment, the Dominion had been the monster at the door. Now it looked like the latest hand wearing an older glove. Humanity had prepared to expose a conquering empire, but the buried sites were revealing something wider, colder, and more terrifying. Across galactic history, again and again, powerful civilizations had discovered younger ones and made the same argument with different flags. Stability, order, protection, integration, necessary force. Every age invented prettier words for ownership, and every empire eventually convinced itself that conquest was not cruelty if the paperwork sounded responsible. The Lantern Protocol, built to expose Dominion crimes, suddenly had a larger target. Sanaa looked up from her screen, eyes wet but focused. "Commander, the buried sites are feeding the broadcast chain. Not just boosting it, rewriting it." "Rewriting how?" "They are adding records. Thousands of them. Maybe more." Her voice broke around the scale of it. "Not only Dominion victims, older victims. Civilizations nobody alive remembers." Above Earth, High Marshal Threx watched the same impossible archive unfold across his locked systems. His officers no longer pretended it was merely human information warfare. Some stared in open horror. Others refused to look away. The Dominion had built its pride on the belief that it was the natural author of order, the necessary adult in a dangerous galaxy. But the images spreading through its command network showed that its doctrine was not original, not noble, not even uniquely imperial. It was a recycled disease. Threx's oldest strategy officer spoke first. "High Marshal, this is destabilizing fleet morale." Threx did not answer. On the screen, one of the ancient records showed a world resisting exactly as Earth resisted now. Its defenders had built hidden networks, turned civilian systems into warnings, and tried to send the truth beyond their own sky. They failed. Their relays died. Their cities burned. Their name disappeared from every living map. Then a final image appeared from that dead species, preserved beneath Earth's ocean for longer than human language had existed. A warning, not in words, in structure, in intention, in the unbearable clarity of a hand reaching forward across deep time. When the conqueror comes, do not merely defeat him. Break the method or another will wear his face. Mara felt the sentence without hearing it, and the chamber felt it with her. The entire strategy of the war twisted in that instant. Survival was no longer enough. Even the victory was too small. If Earth destroyed Threx's fleet and left the Empire's logic intact, Another fleet would come one day under another banner, carrying the same beautiful excuses, and some other young world would wake beneath the shadow of someone else's order. Elias looked at Mara, and she saw the terrible question he had carried for decades. "You knew the lantern might become this," she said. "I hoped it would not need to. You built it to broadcast the Dominion's crimes. I built it to let Earth answer the buried sites if they ever asked what kind of species we were." The room went silent. That was the secret beneath the whole defense plan. Not just weapons hidden in debris. Not just messages hidden in civilization. Not even the ancient structures beneath the planet. Humanity had spent 70 years preparing for invasion because the first alien pattern it decoded had taught it the universe was dangerous. But Elias had prepared for a second judgment as well. If something older was listening, if the buried watchers beneath Earth were measuring whether humanity would become another frightened species that survived by imitating its oppressor, then the real test had never been whether Earth could fight. The test was what Earth would do once it could win. A new alert struck the chamber before Mara could speak. The Dominion reinforcements had accelerated. 500 vessels became 620. Then 700. The Empire had committed regional reserves, siege carriers, suppression wings, and command ships large enough to darken continents from orbit. They were no longer coming to force surrender. They were coming to erase the broadcast, erase the evidence, erase the embarrassment, and if necessary erase the species that had made the galaxy remember. Sanaa's voice hardened. Arrival estimate revised. 3 hours. Mara looked at the glowing map of Earth, at the buried sites, at the orbital graveyard, at the Dominion fleet tightening above them like a closing fist. Every defensive option now carried a cost too large to hide from. Every delay risked the lantern. Every attack risked proving the ancient warning right. Then the Pacific structure transmitted one final pulse into the chamber. This time, the translation systems found words. Not many. Only 4, appearing across every monitor in a language no human had written, then reshaping themselves into English with unbearable precision. Choose your inheritance.
Big power is here, but Mara must decide how humans use it.
For the first time since the invasion began, Mara Voss did not give an order. She stood beneath 11 kilometers of ocean while 4 words burned across every screen in the chamber, and she understood with a coldness that settled into her bones that humanity had been handed the most dangerous kind of power in the universe. Not the power to destroy an enemy, but the power to decide what survival would mean afterward. Choose your inheritance. The buried sites waited. The lantern grid waited. The Dominion fleet above Earth waited. Farther out, 700 Imperial vessels tore through the outer system on accelerated drives, coming fast enough to make their own engines bleed radiation into space. They were no longer moving like an occupation force. They were moving like a species trying to murder a question before it reached too many ears. Sanaa Iqbal broke the silence first. "Commander, the ancient network is requesting command alignment." Mara turned. "Requesting from whom?" Sanaa swallowed. "From us." That answer moved through the chamber like pressure through deep water. The old things beneath Earth were not taking control. They were not saving humanity. They were not judging from above like gods. They were offering a door and waiting to see whether humans would open it with the same hands that had built bombs, hospitals, prisons, poems, ships, and graves. Elias Wren's voice was quiet. "It will amplify whatever instruction we give it." "What does that mean?" Mara asked. "It means if we choose destruction, it will help us destroy. If we choose exposure, it will help us expose ourselves. If we choose restraint, it will make restraint powerful enough to matter." Mara looked back at the orbital map. The first Dominion fleet still held near Earth, damaged but dangerous. Threx's formation had widened into a shield against the lantern, yet his ships had stopped firing for nearly a full minute. That hesitation was not mercy. It was confusion, and confusion never lasted long in a military mind. Soon he would either regain control or be overruled by the reinforcements already coming to bury his doubt beneath orders. "Can we disable the first fleet without killing them?" Mara asked. Elias did not answer quickly enough. "Elias, with the ancient network assisting our targeting, maybe." Against Threx's current ships, yes, partially. Against the reinforcements at full strength, no guarantee. Then give me the option with the fewest dead. The fewest human dead or the fewest total dead? Mara's eyes snapped to him, and for one hard second the chamber saw the edge beneath her calm. Do not ever ask me that, as if those are different moral categories. Elias lowered his gaze. Then the option is harder. Above them, High Marshal Threx finally received the order that ended his hesitation. It came from the Dominion Sovereign Command, routed through 3 war relays and signed by the Imperial Security Throne itself. The order was short, absolute, and written in the old command language used only when refusal became treason. Silence Earth. Not defeat. Not occupied. Not negotiate. Silence. Threx read it once, then a second time, while the exposed histories of dead civilizations continued scrolling across his private display. He had spent his life believing the Empire prevented chaos. He had told younger officers that conquest was ugly but necessary, that the galaxy was too dangerous to leave young species uncontrolled, that order was a mercy when the alternative was extinction. Now Earth had shown him where that argument came from. It had not been born from wisdom. It had been inherited from monsters who had once called themselves necessary too. His communications officer waited for confirmation. High Marshal. Threx closed the archive. Prepare surface suppression patterns, he said. Across the Dominion fleet, weapons aligned toward Earth. In the ocean chamber, every alarm became red. Sanaa's hands flew across her station. Multiple orbital strike locks. They are targeting communications hubs, power transfer nodes, aerospace ports, and major data centers. Cities? Mara asked. Not directly. Blast radius? Sanaa's face tightened. They know exactly what the blast radius is. There it was. The oldest cowardice of war. Aim near civilians. Call it infrastructure. Let the dead become an unfortunate proximity instead of an intended murder. Mara had read enough human history to recognize the trick, and that recognition filled her not with shock, but with an exhausted ancient anger. The Dominion was alien in flesh, language, and empire, but its excuses were painfully familiar. Activate reserve defense, she said. Elias looked at her. Which layer? All of them that do not kill crews. The order left the chamber and passed into Earth. The planet answered. Old satellites that had shown no weapon signature began shedding outer shells, not revealing cannons, but mirror arrays folded so thin they had hidden inside insulation for decades. Weather balloons burst above storm systems and released reflective dust that formed temporary atmospheric lenses. Civilian telescopes redirected power through lunar mirrors. Ocean cables carried timing signals to buried stations that had never appeared on any public map. The ancient sites beneath the crust pulsed once, and the laws of targeting around Earth became suddenly violently inconvenient. The Dominion fired. Hundreds of lances fell. The sky became a cage of violet fire. Then humanity bent the cage. Some beams scattered into harmless auroras. Some were pulled sideways into the empty ocean. Some struck hardened decoy nodes that had been built beneath deserts, mountains, and abandoned industrial zones for exactly this purpose. A few got through. Mara saw them. She did not look away. A data center outside Nairobi vanished in a column of white heat after its evacuation window missed by 23 seconds. A launch facility in northern Canada took a direct hit before its shield lens fully formed. A relay station in the Philippines survived the first strike and failed on the second, taking its crew with it because they had stayed to keep the lantern packets moving for 7 more breaths. Sanaa began reading casualties, then stopped when her voice cracked. Mara did it for her. She read the numbers into the command log herself, each location, each estimate, each confirmed loss. She made the room hear them. She made herself hear them. The war was not a clean display of human brilliance. It was not a song about clever traps and frightened enemies. It was blood, heat, missed seconds, brave people in small rooms, and the terrible price of forcing an empire to show its true face. And still, the lantern did not die. It grew.
Loss became proof, and now faraway worlds are ready to rise.
Every strike the Dominion fired was captured, time-stamped, translated, and sent outward through the ancient network now fused with human systems. The galaxy did not receive only old crimes anymore. It received the present one in real time. Conquered worlds saw the Empire aim at civilian infrastructure. Neutral stations saw human defenses redirect fire away from cities instead of retaliating against population centers. Dominion client species saw officers hesitate before obeying and understood that doubt had reached even the Conqueror's bridge. Then the first response came back. It was weak, delayed, and nearly lost inside radiation noise from the approaching reinforcements. Sanaa caught it because she was looking for anything that proved the lantern had crossed beyond Earth. A signal from Aurica Prime, one of the worlds in the buried Dominion files. Then another from a mining moon whose name had been replaced by an imperial number. Then 5 more. Then hundreds. They were not military responses. Not yet. They were acknowledgments. Fragments. Local relays turning toward Earth. Hidden receivers waking. Old resistance codes transmitting after generations of silence. Worlds that had been taught they were alone were discovering that their grief had witnesses. Mara watched the map bloom outward, and hope entered the chamber so suddenly it hurt. But hope was not victory. At the edge of the inner system, the Dominion reinforcements arrived early. 700 ships fell out of transit in a wall of light beyond Mars, and their first formation was not built for occupation, intimidation, or negotiation. It was a firing line. Sanaa looked up, pale and shaking. "Commander, they are targeting Earth's oceans." Elias went still. Mara understood why. They were not aiming at humanity's cities anymore. They were aiming at the buried sites. The first ocean-targeting solution appeared on Mara's screen as a line of red circles drawn across the planet's blue skin. Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, Southern. Not cities, not fleets, not launch sites, oceans. The Dominion had looked at the ancient lights beneath Earth and chosen the simplest imperial answer to a mystery it could not own. If something under the water was helping humanity, then boil the water. If something beneath the crust was speaking, then crack the crust. If the planet itself had become a witness, then wound the witness until it went silent. For 1 second, Mara saw the war as Threx's masters must have seen it from their distant command thrones. Earth was no longer a primitive world resisting conquest. It was an infection point, a place where history had begun leaking through the walls, a place where conquered species were hearing names they had been ordered to forget, a place where soldiers inside the Dominion fleet had paused before firing because a human broadcast had made obedience feel visible. That made Earth more dangerous than any weapon. Sanaa's voice shook, but her hands remained steady. Estimated first strike impact in 8 minutes. They are using deep penetration gravitic lances. If they hit the ocean basins directly, the blast transfer will trigger global tsunami chains, atmospheric vapor shock, and tectonic instability around at least 6 buried sites. Elias Wren closed his eyes. They are not trying to destroy the sites. Mara looked at him sharply. They are trying to force them to defend themselves, he said. If the ancient network responds at full strength, it may do so without our restraint. The Dominion wants proof that Earth is hiding a planetary-scale weapon. Mara understood the trap immediately, and the understanding tasted like iron. If humanity let the lances fall, millions could die and the ancient sites could be crippled. If humanity unleashed the buried network without limits, the Dominion would broadcast one clean image to every frightened neutral system in range. Earth commanding an unknown planetary force against an imperial fleet. The Empire would stop looking like an exposed conqueror and start looking like the shield between the galaxy and something terrifying. The truth could still be lost if the first image was frightening enough. Options, Mara said. Sanaa pulled up defensive projections. We can redirect 38% with orbital mirrors. Another 17% with atmospheric lenses if they survive the opening volley. Human-built systems cannot handle the full strike. The ancient network? Mara asked. Elias answered softly. It can stop all of it. At what cost? We do not know. Mara turned on him. Best estimate. Elias looked at the glowing map of buried sites, at the 21 ancient lights beneath the continents and oceans, And for once, he did not hide behind uncertainty. If we command full defensive release, it may interpret all hostile vessels as the threat source. Not disabled. Remove. Every Dominion ship in near space could be erased before its crews understand they have been judged. The chamber went silent. 700 reinforcements. Threx's damaged fleet. Command crews, conscripts, engineers, medics, enslaved client species pressed into Imperial service, young officers who had never chosen the doctrine they inherited, and monsters who absolutely had. All of them were reduced to a clean solution by something older than mercy. Mara felt every eye in the chamber on her, and beneath that, she felt something worse. The ancient network waiting. Not impatient, not eager. Waiting like a question carved into the bones of the world. Choose your inheritance. On the main display, the Dominion firing line brightened. 6 minutes.
Only 6 minutes left, and one alien leader may finally break free.
Above Earth, High Marshal Threx watched the ocean-targeting command propagate through his fleet and felt his own bridge divide without anyone moving. The order had not come from him, but it carried his authority now that it passed through his formation. His officers would obey because obedience had carried them across 9 conquests, 61 histories, and a lifetime of decorated certainty. Yet he could see the hesitation in the smallest details. A weapons officer rechecking calculations already confirmed, a navigator delaying formation lock by half a second, a communications aide staring too long at the lantern fragments still crawling across a side display. Earth had done something to them. Not defeated them. Not yet. Made them aware. That was worse. High Marshal, his oldest strategy officer said quietly. Sovereign command requires confirmation that your fleet will participate in the ocean strike. Threx looked at Earth. The blue planet turned below him, bright with storms, cities, and those impossible buried lights. He thought of the first message. You are late. He had believed it was arrogance then. Now he wondered if it had been grief. How many civilian casualties? He asked. The officer hesitated. Projected human casualties are classified as acceptable under silence priority doctrine. That was not my question. No one answered. Threx's claws closed slowly around the edge of his command rail. The Empire had trained him to recognize rebellion in others, never in the quiet space before his own next sentence. 5 minutes. In the ocean chamber, Mara made her decision. Open a channel to Threx. Sanaa turned so fast her chair struck the console. Commander, open it. Elias stared at her. Mara, the reinforcement fleet will fire before diplomacy can matter. I am not negotiating. The channel cut through Dominion jamming on the back of the lantern itself, carried by ocean cables, dead satellites, ancient pulses, and stolen Imperial encryption. Threx's image appeared on the central wall, tall, armored, and exhausted in a way no conqueror ever wanted recorded. Mara stepped forward. High Marshal Threx, she said. Your reinforcements are about to fire on Earth's oceans. If they do, we can stop them. You need to understand what that means. Threx's eyes narrowed. A threat? No. A warning. The thing beneath our world is not fully under our control, but it is listening to us. If we ask it for survival without restraint, your fleet may disappear. The Dominion bridge behind him shifted with visible alarm. Mara continued before he could speak. We do not want that. Not because you deserve mercy, but because some of your crew deserve a choice before they die carrying out someone else's fear. Threx stared at her as if she had spoken a language older than the one on his screens. You are asking me to stop 700 ships, he said. I am asking you to prove you are not just another voice repeating an inherited order. For minutes, Threx looked away from the channel, and Mara saw the war move into him. Not around him, into him. Every conquest file, every exposed record, every buried warning, every silent officer waiting to see whether the man who led them still belonged entirely to the machine that made him. Then sovereign command overrode his hesitation. Across the firing line beyond Mars, weapons locks are finalized in perfect sequence. Sanaa whispered, They are charging. Mara did not break eye contact with Threx. High Marshal. This is the last moment where your choice can still be yours. 3 minutes. Threx turned from the screen and gave an order Mara could not hear. For half a second, nothing changed. Then 12 Dominion ships in his own formation broke alignment and moved between Earth and the reinforcement firing line. Then 20. Then 80. Then Threx's flagship shifted its bow away from Earth and placed itself directly in the path of the first ocean-killing lance. Sanaa stopped breathing. The Dominion fleet had not surrendered. It had split. The first ocean-killing lance fired from beyond Mars, and the Dominion flagship moved into its path like a blade choosing to become a shield. For one suspended second, every map in Maravas's chamber showed the same impossible geometry. 700 Imperial vessels in firing formation. Earth turning below them with 21 ancient lights burning beneath its oceans and continents. Threx's divided fleet broke apart from within, some ships aligning with Sovereign Command, some hesitating, and some crossing the line of fire because one conqueror had finally understood that obedience was not the same thing as duty. The lance struck Threx's flagship across its forward shield and shattered into violet fragments that scattered over Earth's upper atmosphere like burning glass. His ship survived. Barely. Then the firing line opened. Space became white. Mara did not shout. She did not pray. She did not look away. She stood in the blue light of the awakened Earth and gave the order that would define humanity longer than any victory ever could. Defensive restraint only. Disable hostile fire. Preserve crews where possible. Broadcast everything. The ancient network accepted. It did not roar. It listened. Then Earth answered with every quiet thing humanity had ever built. Dead satellites turned their broken bodies into mirrors. Lunar dust arrays flashed like silver scars across the dark. Undersea cables carried timing codes through the bones of continents. Civilian telescopes, forgotten probes, abandoned stations, storm balloons, old rockets, research buoys, and cracked museum antennas joined the same rhythm. The buried sites pulsed once, not as masters, but as witnesses, and the space around Earth changed. The Dominion lances bent. Some folded into harmless auroras. Some broke apart into particles so fine they painted the magnetosphere with ghostly light. Some turned back into empty space, spinning away from cities, oceans, ships, and moons. And some, aimed too precisely and too viciously to be redirected safely, were caught by the ancient network and held motionless between worlds, frozen as bright spears above the planet that had refused to kneel. Across the galaxy, the lantern carried the image. Conquered worlds watched Earth spare the crews sent to erase it. They watched Dominion ships split from their own empire to block a massacre. They watched human systems prioritize evacuation routes, medical corridors, and enemy crew survival while Imperial command channels screamed for total silence. And for the first time in generations, worlds that had whispered resistance in basements, mines, temples, and prison moons saw the Empire bleed authority in public. The rebellion did not begin with explosions. It began with doors opening.
No, victory is not a big boom. It is many people saying no.
On Eureka Prime, dockworkers refused to fuel Imperial carriers. On the numbered mining moon, enslaved technicians locked down a military relay and transmitted their real name for the first time in 80 years. On 3 client worlds, local defense fleets turned their weapons away from civilians and toward Dominion command stations. Across occupied space, the question spread faster than fear. If Earth could say no, why not us? Beyond Mars, the Imperial firing line collapsed into confusion. Ships loyal to Sovereign Command tried to continue the strike. Ships loyal to Threx blocked them. Ships whose crews had seen too much simply powered down weapons and drifted. The Empire had arrived as a single fist and become hundreds of separate choices. That was when Mara understood the final truth of the lantern. It had never been designed to make humanity look powerful. It had been designed to make everyone else remember they were not powerless. Elias Wren stood beside her with tears on his face, watching 70 years of secrecy become something larger than strategy. Sanaa Iqbal was still tracking casualties, still marking losses, still refusing to let triumph erase the price. People had died. Stations had burned. Families would receive names instead of reunions. No victory worth having was clean enough to be celebrated without grief. Mara opened a channel to every Dominion vessel in near space. This is Commander Mara Voss of Earth. Any ship that powers down weapons will receive rescue assistance. Any ship that continues firing will be disabled. No crew will be harmed unless they force us to choose between them and the lives below. She paused, then added the sentence that would later be carved into the first hall of the Free World's assembly. We are not here to inherit your empire. We are here to end the need for one. One by one, weapon signatures disappeared. Not all. Never all. Some loyalists fought until ancient pulses and human drones cut their engines from the dark. Some commanders tried to ram relay chains and were stopped cold above the moon. But most ships stopped because the hardest thing for an empire to survive is not defeat. It is permission for its servants to imagine life after it. High Marshal Threx's damaged flagship drifted above Earth, venting its atmosphere, its forward hull blackened from the lance it had taken. When his channel opened, he no longer looked like the face of conquest. He looked like a soldier standing in the ruins of the story that had raised him. What happens now? He asked. Mara looked at the planet on the main display, at the oceans the Dominion had tried to burn, at the ancient lights slowly dimming beneath them, and at the flood of signals arriving from worlds that were no longer whispering. Now, she said. Everyone hears the truth. 5 years later, children on Earth would draw the battle as a sky full of frozen lightning. Survivors from occupied worlds would call it the Morning of Names. Dominion historians would call it the Fracture. Human diplomats would call it the First Day of Work. Mara never liked any of those names. To her, it was the day humanity was given every reason to become terrifying and chose to become responsible instead. The ancient sites went silent after the accords were signed, but they did not vanish. They remained beneath the oceans, deserts, ice, and stone, waiting as they had always waited, not for worship, not for commands, but for proof that a young species could touch power without becoming the thing it feared. And above Earth, in the orbital graveyard where the first satellite had opened like an eye, a new relay was built from its broken frame. It pointed outward, beyond old borders, beyond conquered routes, beyond every empire that still believed fear was the same as order. This first message carried no threat, only a promise. You are not alone.
Humans win, but not by hate. Mara keeps mercy alive, saves many lives, and a broken galaxy starts to hope again.